Nora Vale was rinsing a chipped teacup when she found the blue envelope tucked behind the heating vent in her father's old kitchen. She did not scream. She did not cry. She simply turned off the tap, dried her hands on the towel her mother hated, and placed the envelope inside the bread box. Because by morning, she would understand that her family had not stolen an inheritance from her. They had stolen the only version of love she still believed in. The kitchen smelled of boiled black tea, rain on cedar shingles, and the faint mineral dust that always rose from the old floorboards when the weather changed. Her father used to say the house had bones like an animal. When storms came, it remembered everything. Nora had never liked that saying. At 46, she liked things that could be cataloged, labeled, restored, and placed exactly where they belonged. Broken porcelain could be mended. Old botanical prints could be cleaned. Family silver could be polished until the faces reflected in it became less distorted. People were different. People learned to smile while removing your name from things. She stood barefoot on the cold kitchen tile, watching the envelope as if it might breathe. It was the color of faded cornflowers, sealed with a strip of tape turned yellow at the edges. On the front, in her father's narrow handwriting, were 6 words. "If they tell her I forgot." Nora's fingers tightened around the dish towel. Outside, late October rain clicked against the windows of Vale House, the family estate that sat halfway between 2 worlds. To the east, the hills rolled down into Millhaven, where people worked with their hands, counted overtime, and knew how to stretch soup through 3 dinners. To the west, the gated road curved toward Bellwether Ridge, where old families kept horses they did not ride, and portraits of ancestors they barely understood. The Vales had always lived between. Not poor enough to be dismissed, not rich enough to be forgiven. Nora had grown up hearing that sentence in different forms. From her mother, it came as a warning. From her father, it came as a joke. From her older brother Ellis, it came as resentment. From her younger sister Maribel, it came as a reason to want more. Nora had simply made herself useful. That was how she survived childhood. She learned where the keys were kept. She remembered which bill was due. She folded receipts into neat thirds and put them in labeled envelopes because her father's memory had begun slipping before anyone wanted to admit it. She fixed the heater. She drove him to appointments. She learned his medications, his favorite tea, the exact way his hand trembled when he was hiding pain. And somehow, when he died, everyone said Ellis had carried the family. At the funeral, Ellis stood at the church doors shaking hands, his silver tie straight, his voice low and practiced. Maribel leaned into their mother's shoulder and cried beautifully. Their mother, Celeste Vale, accepted condolences as if grief were a room she owned, and everyone else had entered without permission. Nora had stood near the back, holding a box of her father's medical files because no one else knew the insurance office still needed them. When an old neighbor whispered, "Your brother did so much for him," Nora smiled. She had smiled so hard her jaw ached. Now, 3 weeks later, she was alone in the house everyone had told her was no longer hers. The envelope lay in the bread box beside a half loaf of rye. She stared at it until the kettle clicked off behind her. That small click brought back a memory so sharply she almost turned around, expecting to see him. Her father, at the kitchen table, steam rising from his cup, his left hand tapping the wood twice before he spoke. "Keep copies, Nora," he used to say. "A thing unwritten becomes a thing someone else can rename." She had thought he meant invoices. She had thought he meant estate taxes. She had thought he meant the nursery business, the orchard leases, the little guest cottages he rented to painters in summer. She had not thought he meant family. Nora lifted the envelope again. Her thumb felt the ridge of paper inside. More than one page. Maybe photographs. Maybe a letter. Then the front door opened. She slid the envelope under the stack of dishcloths in the drawer and closed it just as Ellis's voice filled the hall. "Nora!" There was a kind of confidence in the way her brother said her name now, as if the house had already agreed with him. "I'm in the kitchen," she said. Ellis entered wearing a charcoal coat damp with rain and the expression of a man who had practiced patience in the car. He was 50, handsome in the way old houses were handsome, all symmetry and hidden rot. Behind him came Maribel, wrapped in a cream sweater that probably cost more than Nora's monthly grocery bill, and their mother, Celeste, holding a black umbrella though she was indoors. Celeste's eyes moved once around the kitchen, not to Nora, to the cupboards, to the counters, to the drawers. Nora noticed. She always noticed the thing people looked at before they remembered to look at her. "What are you doing here?" Ellis asked gently. It was the gentleness that made her stomach tighten. "I had a key," Nora said. "You had a key," Celeste corrected. "Past tense would be more appropriate now," Maribel gave a small sigh. "Mom, please." Nora looked at her sister. Maribel's eyes were swollen, but her mascara was perfect. That was Maribel's gift. Even her distress knew where to sit. "I came to collect Dad's herbarium folders," Nora said. "He wanted them donated to the botanical library." Ellis's mouth tightened. "We'll discuss donations after probate." "They're not part of probate. They were his field notes." "Everything in the house is part of the estate until the court says otherwise." The word court landed in the kitchen like a plate set down too hard. Nora turned back to the sink so they would not see her face. The chipped teacup sat in the drying rack. Blue flowers around the rim, one handle cracked. Her father's cup. Celeste had always called it ugly. Nora had used it every morning since he died, not because she wanted comfort, but because she needed proof that one small thing could remain where it belonged. Ellis saw it. "That should probably be packed," he said. Nora picked up the cup. "I'll take it." Celeste's voice sharpened. "No, you won't." For the first time, Nora looked directly at her mother. Celeste Vale was 72 and still carried beauty like a weapon she had refused to surrender. Her hair was white now, cut blunt at her jaw, her lipstick the color of dried rose petals. She had spent decades ensuring no one saw the family's fraying seams. She corrected grammar at dinner, polished silver before storms, and believed gratitude was something children owed quietly. "It was Dad's cup," Nora said. "And this is your father's house." The silence after that was not empty. It had weight. Maribel shifted. Ellis looked away. Nora understood then that they had not come by chance. They knew she would be there. "What's going on?" she asked. Ellis reached into his coat and removed a folded document. "I didn't want to do this here." "That usually means you did." His jaw flexed, but he handed her the paper. It was a notice from the estate attorney, Graham Pell. Nora recognized his embossed letterhead. Pell and Wexler, counselors in trust and probate. Her father had used Graham for 20 years because, as he once said, "A dry man is useful with dry matters." The notice was addressed to Nora Vale. Formal demand to vacate premises. She read the first line, then the second, then the date. "You're evicting me from Dad's house?" Maribel stepped forward. "No one is evicting you." Nora held up the notice. Maribel looked at Ellis. Ellis inhaled. "The estate needs clean boundaries. You've been coming in and out, removing items." "Removing items?" "Sentimental items," he said quickly. "No one is accusing you of anything." "Your lawyer is." "Our lawyer," Celeste said. Nora looked from one face to another. There it was. The first clean fracture. Not Dad's lawyer, Not the family lawyer, their lawyer. The rain struck harder against the window, a sudden gust pushing water beneath the loose frame. Nora reached automatically for the folded cloth kept near the sill. She pressed it into the corner where the leak started. Her father had always meant to repair it. Ellis had always meant to hire someone. Maribel had always meant to remind someone. Nora had always done it. Ellis watched her with something like embarrassment. Celeste watched with annoyance. Maribel watched with pity. Which was worse? "You have 7 days," Ellis said. Nora laughed once. It surprised all of them, even her. 7 days, she repeated. I cared for him for 7 years. Celeste's face hardened. Your father made his choices. What choices? Ellis folded his hands. The will is clear. Nora felt the room tilt, but she kept her voice level. I haven't seen the will. You'll receive a copy. When? After formal processing. Then how do you know it's clear? No one answered. That was when the heating vent gave a soft metallic rattle behind her. All three of them looked toward it. Too fast. Nora's pulse slowed, not quickened. Slowed. Her father used to say panic made people clumsy, but clarity could make a person cold. She set the chipped cup gently on the counter. You came here for something, she said. Ellis blinked. We came to talk to you. No, Nora said. You came to look. Celeste's umbrella handle creaked under her grip. Maribel whispered, Nora, don't make this ugly. Nora almost smiled. It was always ugly when she named what others preferred to do silently. Ellis took a step closer, lowering his voice. This is grief talking. No, Nora said. Grief came 3 weeks ago. This is inventory. For a moment, Ellis looked like the boy who used to hide report cards in the piano bench and beg Nora not to tell. Then the man returned. You need to leave the house keys on the table when you go. Nora nodded as if considering it. Then she picked up her coat, took the chipped teacup, and walked past them. At the door, Celeste said, Nora. She stopped. If your father wanted you to have more, he would have said so. Nora looked back at her mother. Celeste's eyes were dry. Ellis's eyes were guarded. Maribel's eyes were wet. But Maribel's hand was pressed against the drawer where Nora had hidden the envelope. Not touching it, just hovering. Nora saw it, and Maribel saw that she saw. The kitchen seemed to narrow around them. Nora left without another word. Outside, the rain was cold enough to sting. She walked to her old green car parked beneath the cedar tree, the chipped cup tucked inside her coat. She did not look back until she reached the end of the drive. Through the kitchen window, she saw Ellis open the drawer. She saw Celeste lean in. She saw Maribel cover her mouth. They were looking for the envelope, and they did not know Nora had already taken it. Not the first envelope, the second one, the one she had felt taped beneath the drawer when she reached for her coat. She drove down the hill with both envelopes on the passenger seat, the blue one and the smaller white one hidden inside the lining of her sleeve. At the first stoplight, Nora pulled over. Her hands had begun shaking. She let them. There was no one in the car to tell her she was being dramatic. The blue envelope opened with a dry whisper. Inside was a letter, 3 photographs, and a photocopy of a document marked unsigned draft. The letter was dated 6 months before her father died. Nora, if this reaches you, then someone has decided to finish a story without the person who held the pen. She stopped reading. The traffic lights turned green. A horn sounded behind her. She pulled into the parking lot of a closed flower shop, rain blurring the windshield into silver lines. The smell of cedar clung to her sleeves from the tree outside Vale House. She looked down at her father's handwriting again. You will be told I changed my mind. You will be told I was confused. You will be told that gratitude is not inheritance. That last sentence struck her so hard she had to open the window. Cold air rushed in. Her father had known. He had known exactly what they would say. The photographs were old Polaroids. The first showed Nora at 27, standing beside a half-collapsed greenhouse, mud on her jeans, smiling with one hand shielding her eyes from the sun. The second showed her father beside her, holding a folder labeled Restoration Loan. The third showed Ellis, Maribel, and Celeste at a ribbon cutting 5 years later in front of the same greenhouse, now transformed into the Vale Botanical Conservatory. Nora remembered that day. She had not attended, not because she was busy, because her mother had told her donors preferred a cleaner family narrative. The newspaper article the next morning credited Ellis for reviving the Vale legacy and Maribel for curating the family's botanical heritage. Nora had clipped it, folded it into thirds, and put it in an envelope labeled Press Errors. She had never corrected it. Not once. The photocopied draft beneath the photographs made her breath stop. It was a page from a will. I leave Vale House, the conservatory lands, and all associated botanical archives to my daughter, Nora Elise Vale, in recognition of her decades of stewardship, sacrifice, and restoration work. Nora read the line again, then again. The words did not heal anything. They cut. Because for one brief second, she allowed herself to imagine what it would have felt like if he had said it while alive. Not in a hidden envelope, not in a draft, not too late. She picked up the white envelope next. It was smaller, sealed with no writing on the front. Inside was a brass key and a receipt from Merrow and Finch Storage, Unit 19B, paid through the end of the year. On the back of the receipt, in handwriting that was not her father's, someone had written, "Ask what Graham was paid to lose." Nora sat very still. Graham Pell, the estate attorney, the dry man useful with dry matters. Her phone buzzed, a message from Ellis. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Nora looked at the two envelopes, then at the chipped cup sitting in the cup holder beside her. The crack in its handle looked like a vein. She typed back, I won't. Then she drove to the storage facility. Merrow and Finch sat near the old rail line, where the town thinned into warehouses, repair shops, and the kind of diners where coffee tasted burnt no matter how fresh it was. The office was closed, but the gate code was printed on the receipt in her father's careful hand. A sodium light flickered above Unit 19B. The brass key turned smoothly. Inside, the unit smelled of dust, cardboard, machine oil, and lavender. Nora froze. Lavender had been her father's scent near the end. Not because he wore it, because she tucked dried lavender into his drawers after the hospital smell began following him home. Celeste hated it. She said it made the house smell like old women and funerals. Her father had smiled and said, Then we'll confuse the ghosts. Nora pulled the string on the overhead bulb. Light spilled across 12 banker's boxes, a rolled rug, 2 wooden crates, and her father's old tape recorder. A yellow sticky note was attached to the recorder. Start here. Nora's throat closed. She pressed play. Static crackled. Then her father's voice filled the storage unit, thin but unmistakable. January 12th. Nora brought soup. Celeste told her the salt was wrong. I said nothing. I should have. Nora covered her mouth. The tape clicked softly as it turned. January 18th. Ellis asked again about transferring the conservatory title early, said it would simplify taxes. I told him no. He smiled as if I had misunderstood kindness. A truck passed outside, its tires hissing over wet pavement. Nora did not move. February 2nd, her father continued. Graham says the new will is ready, but the version he sent does not match my instructions. I asked him to correct it. He said memory can become sentimental in men my age. I told him my memory was not the problem. The room seemed to shrink. Nora looked at the boxes. Each one had a label in her father's handwriting. Medical, conservatory, correspondence, Pell. Nora rewound the tape with fingers that no longer shook. She listened again to the part about the will. Then she took out her phone and recorded the recording. Not because she trusted her phone, because she trusted copies. By midnight, she had loaded 3 boxes into her car. By 1 in the morning, she was at her apartment above the closed bookbinder's shop downtown, spreading documents across the floor in careful rows. Her apartment was small, drafty, and filled with things she had repaired for other people. A gilt frame awaiting glass, a botanical chart flattened under weights, a child's wooden chair with 1 new leg. She had built a life around restoring what others called not worth saving. On the table, the chipped cup steamed with black tea. She opened the box labeled Pell. Inside were invoices, letters, printed emails, and handwritten notes. At first, the paper trail looked ordinary. Estate planning, property transfer questions, tax projections, drafts. Then Nora noticed the dates. Her father had requested a revised will on March 4th. Graham Pell confirmed receipt on March 5th. A new will was executed on March 7th, but the copy Ellis had mentioned could not be the March 7th will, because on March 8th, her father had written a letter of complaint. Graham, the document I signed yesterday was not the document I approved. You turned the bequest to Nora into a non-binding memorandum. You replaced ownership with personal acknowledgement. This is not an error. Correct it immediately. Nora read the paragraph 3 times. The betrayal was not only emotional, it had grammar. Someone had changed legal language just enough to turn inheritance into praise, a house into a thank you, a life into a footnote. At 2:20 in the morning, Nora found the first email from Celeste. Graham, perhaps it is best not to agitate Leonard with revisions. His attachment to Nora's caregiving has clouded his sense of fairness. Ellis is better suited to protect the family legacy. Maribel understands presentation. Nora, as we know, has never wanted attention. Nora laughed then, a small sound, almost admiration. Her mother had turned erasure into Nora's personality trait. At 3, she found an invoice marked Special Consultation, paid by Vale Holdings, the small family company Ellis controlled. At 3:30, she found the name that did not belong. Not Ellis, not Celeste, not Maribel. Lucian Ardent. Nora sat back on her heels. She did not know the name. It appeared only once, in a line item from Graham Pell's office. Advisory conference with L. Ardent regarding succession risk. Succession risk. Not inheritance, not grief. Risk. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The city outside her window looked rinsed and colorless. Nora had not slept. She had arranged every document in chronological order across the floor, using teaspoons to hold down curling corners. Her father's tape recorder sat beside her knee. There were 11 tapes. She had listened to 4. On the 4th tape, her father had said something that made her stop breathing. March 19th. Maribel cried today. Not the way she cries when she wants peace. Different. She said if I loved her, I would not make her choose between truth and family. I asked what truth. She would not answer. Nora replayed it. Maribel knew something. Maybe not everything, but something. At 7:15, Nora's phone rang. Maribel. Nora let it ring until the sound became unbearable. Then she answered. For a moment, neither sister spoke. In the silence, Nora heard a dishwasher running on Maribel's end, the clink of expensive plates. Domestic life continuing inside stolen weather. "Are you okay?" Maribel asked. It was such a familiar question. Maribel had asked it after their father fell, after the bank denied the greenhouse loan, after Celeste told Nora she looked tired in front of donors. "Are you okay?" always meant, "Please say yes so I do not have to do anything." "No," Nora said. Maribel inhaled. "Ellis is upset." "That must be difficult for him." "Nora!" "What did you know?" The dishwasher hum stopped. "What are you talking about?" "The will." A pause. Then Maribel's voice softened. "You found something." Not "what will," not "I don't understand." You found something. Nora closed her eyes. There it was, the second fracture. "I found enough to ask again," Nora said. "What did you know?" Maribel whispered, "Not on the phone." "Why?" "Because I have children asleep upstairs." "What does that have to do with the phone?" "Nora, please." That please was old. It pulled at muscle memory. Nora almost became the sister who came when called, who brought soup, who fixed school costumes, who wrote Maribel's scholarship essay and watched Maribel win. Instead, she looked at the papers on the floor. "You have until noon," Nora said. "For what?" "To decide whether you're telling me the truth or giving Ellis time." Maribel's breath hitched. "You think I'm against you?" "I think you're in the room where people are hurting me. That's not the same thing, but it's close." She hung up. At noon, Maribel arrived alone. She came to Nora's apartment wearing jeans, no makeup, and a coat too thin for the weather. That frightened Nora more than tears would have. Maribel looked around at the documents covering the floor. Her face changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Nora stood by the table, arms folded. "Start with March 19th, Nora said. Maribel sat in the wooden chair with the repaired leg. "He told you about that?" "He recorded it." Maribel flinched. "Dad recorded everything near the end," Nora said. "Appointments, conversations, medication notes. He said memory should not have to defend itself." Maribel looked toward the chipped cup. "He loved that ugly thing." "Don't. I'm not trying to. Don't make him human, only when it helps you." Maribel's eyes filled. This time the tears were not beautiful. They clung unevenly. One fell before she could stop it. "I didn't know they changed the will," she said. Nora waited. "I knew Mom was trying to persuade him. I knew Ellis thought you weren't fit to manage the estate." "Not fit." "That was his phrase, not mine." "And yours?" Maribel wiped her cheek. "I thought you would hate owning it." Nora stared at her. "I thought it would trap you," Maribel said quickly. "You spent your whole life taking care of that place, of Dad, of all of us. I thought maybe if Ellis handled the estate, you could finally leave." Nora felt the words move through her, searching for somewhere to land. "You helped take my home because you wanted to free me." Maribel's face crumpled. "I know how that sounds." "No," Nora said. "I don't think you do." Maribel leaned forward. "Mom said Dad was becoming obsessive. that he was rewarding guilt, not making a rational plan. Graham said a contested estate would destroy the conservatory. Ellis said investors would pull out. Everyone said if the property went to you, you would sell it or hide it away or refuse to modernize. Everyone. I should have asked you. Yes. I should have told you. Yes. Maribel looked down. But there's something else. Nora's pulse changed. Maribel reached into her bag and removed a folded program from their father's memorial service. She opened it carefully. Inside was a small memory card taped beneath the printed hymn. I took this from Dad's desk the day before he died. Nora did not touch it. Why? Because Mom told me to destroy it. The room went quiet. Outside, someone rolled a trash bin over wet pavement, the plastic wheels grinding. What's on it? Nora asked. I don't know. Nora almost laughed again. You stole evidence from a dying man and never looked at it? I was scared. Of what? Maribel looked at her then. Of finding out I was exactly who you think I am. That answer was too honest to reject, and too late to forgive. Nora took the memory card. Her old laptop resisted at first, humming as if offended by urgency. The files opened slowly. Audio recordings, photographs, scanned documents. A folder titled L.A. Lucian Ardent. Nora opened it. The first photograph showed a man in his 60s standing beside Ellis at a conservatory fundraising dinner. Silver hair, rimless glasses, one hand resting lightly on Ellis's shoulder. Nora had seen him before. Not often, but enough. He was one of those men rich families produced out of nowhere when money needed to appear respectable. Consultant, donor, strategic advisor, friend of the board. The second file was a letter from Lucian Ardent to Graham Pell. Leonard Vale's attachment to Nora is emotional and therefore unstable. The long-term viability of the property requires separation between sentiment and control. Celeste understands this. Ellis can be guided. Maribel must be reassured. Nora must not be confronted directly until execution is complete. Nora read the last line aloud. Maribel pressed both hands to her mouth. Nora must not be confronted directly until execution is complete. Execution. The word was legal. The word was violent. The next document was a draft press release prepared 6 months before Leonard Vale died. Vale Conservatory announces transformational stewardship under Ellis Vale. 6 months before. Before the will was supposedly finalized. Before probate. Before the funeral. Before Nora had sat beside her father's bed holding ice chips to his mouth while Ellis told donors he was working on succession. Nora clicked the final file. It was a video. Her father appeared seated in his study, thinner than she remembered, a blanket over his knees. The date stamp in the corner read April 21st. His voice was tired but clear. My name is Leonard James Vale. I am recording this because I have reason to believe my intentions regarding my estate are being misrepresented. I leave Vale House and the conservatory archives to Nora Elise Vale, not as charity, not as guilt, but because she is the only person who has preserved them without needing applause. Maribel made a small broken sound. Nora did not look away from the screen. Her father continued. Ellis is my son. I love him. He wants the Vale name to become large enough that no one remembers how small he feels. Maribel is my daughter. I love her. She wants peace so badly she sometimes mistakes silence for mercy. Celeste is my wife. I loved her before resentment became her second language. But Nora... He stopped. His eyes moved towards someone off camera. Is it still recording? A voice answered. Yes, Leonard. Not Graham Pell. Not anyone Nora recognized. Lucien Ardent. Nora felt the room turn cold. Her father looked back at the camera. Nora does not know how to ask for what she has earned. That is partly my fault. I allowed her goodness to become convenient. I allowed others to call it temperament. She did not fail to want things. We failed to offer them without making her beg. The video ended abruptly. Nora stared at the black screen. Maribel whispered, "Lucien recorded that?" Nora replayed the last seconds. The voice calm and polished. "Yes, Leonard." "Why would he record proof?" Nora said slowly. "Then help bury it." Maribel shook her head. Nora opened the folder again. There was one more file, hidden beneath the scroll bar. A contract. Consulting agreement between Vale Holdings and Ardent Legacy Strategies. She scanned the first page. Advising succession, donor management, legal coordination, preservation of institutional continuity. Then she reached the fee structure. Lucien Ardent would receive a percentage of any future development partnership involving the conservatory lands. Not the house, not the archives, the lands. Nora understood then. This had never been only about the will. It was about the valley behind the conservatory, the 6 acres her father refused to sell because rare marsh orchids grew there after spring floods. Nora had spent years documenting them. Developers had wanted that land since she was a teenager. Ellis wanted prestige. Celeste wanted control. Maribel wanted peace. Graham wanted fees. But Lucien Ardent wanted the land. And every person in Nora's family had been useful to him. Maribel stood abruptly. "We have to tell Ellis." Nora looked at her. "Tell him what? That the man guiding him is guiding him? He doesn't know." "Are you sure?" Maribel faltered. Nora gathered the memory card, the letters, the invoices, and the video file onto a flash drive. "What are you doing?" Maribel asked. "Making copies." "Nora, wait!" Nora stopped. Maribel's face had gone pale. "If you expose this," she said, "Mom will say Dad was incompetent. Ellis will say you manipulated him. Graham will bury you in procedure. Lucien will make it look like a family dispute. They'll turn every year you cared for Dad into evidence that you influenced him." Nora looked at the repaired chair, the chipped cup, the documents held down by teaspoons. "How long have you known that would be their argument?" Maribel did not answer. That was the 3rd fracture. Nora nodded. "Leave. Nora, leave, before I understand you more than I can survive." Maribel picked up her coat. At the door, she turned. "I'm sorry." Nora looked at her sister's hand on the knob. Sorry was a small word. It fit easily in the mouth. It did not repair titles, signatures, years, or the sound of your father saying, "Too late," what you needed while young. "Then do one useful thing," Nora said. Maribel looked back. "Don't warn them." Maribel's silence lasted 3 seconds too long. Then she left. Nora locked the door behind her, then pushed the table against it. Not because Maribel would return, because some part of Nora had finally understood that the danger was not strangers. It had never been strangers. By evening, Ellis had called 9 times. Celeste had called twice. Graham Pell had sent an email reminding Nora that unauthorized removal of estate property could result in civil action. Nora read it while eating toast over the sink. Then she forwarded it to herself, printed 2 copies, and placed one in an envelope labeled "Threats, Polite." Her father would have laughed at that. The laugh almost broke her. Instead, she opened the next box. Conservatory. Inside were field notebooks, grant applications, soil reports, donor letters, and old photographs of Nora kneeling in mud beside endangered plants, while Ellis appeared in later brochures wearing clean boots. She worked until midnight, building a timeline on the wall with painter's tape. At the top, what they say happened. Below, what happened. The two timelines diverged almost immediately. What they said. Ellis revived the conservatory in 2014. What happened? Nora secured the restoration loan in 2009, negotiated with the county, wrote the grant proposal, and spent 4 winters repairing the glass house before Ellis returned from a failed investment venture and renamed the project. What they said. Maribel curated the botanical archive. What happened? Nora cataloged 9,000 specimens by hand. Maribel hosted the donor preview. What they said. Celeste maintained family unity. What happened? Celeste filtered every conversation through reputation. What they said. Leonard forgot. What happened? Leonard documented everything. At 2 in the morning, Nora found the ledger. It was wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine, tucked beneath soil reports from 1998. The cover was cracked green leather. Her father's initials were pressed into the corner. LJV. Inside were handwritten entries, not financial exactly, but moral. A record of who did what, who paid, who promised, who failed. At first, Nora thought it was one of her father's private eccentricities. Then she saw her own name. Nora paid county filing fee from personal account. Reimbursed? No. Nora repaired east greenhouse panels after storm. Invoice submitted? No. Nora delayed fellowship in Portland due to Celeste surgery. Family acknowledgement? No. Nora sold car to cover spring payroll. Reimbursed? No. Nora told me Ellis needed grace. I gave him money. He did not repay. She never told Celeste. Nora's vision blurred. The ledger was not sentimental. It was exact. Dates, amounts. Witnesses. Receipts attached with aging tape. Her father had kept a record of every invisible sacrifice. Not all of them. Enough. She turned pages faster, then stopped. A page near the back had been torn out. Only a strip remained near the binding. On the strip, 3 words were still visible. Ardent. First approach. Nora sat back. Lucian Ardent had approached the family earlier than the contract showed. Much earlier. She searched the box until dawn, but the missing page was gone. At 8:30, someone knocked. Not gently. Nora looked through the peephole. Graham Pell stood in the hallway. He wore a navy overcoat and carried a leather folder. His expression was composed, in the way of men who believed doors opened because they had arrived. Nora did not move the table. "What do you want, Graham?" His voice came muffled through the door. "A conversation." "Send a letter." "I have." "Send a better one." A pause. "Nora, this can be resolved quietly." She almost smiled. Quietly was the family's oldest weapon. "I'm listening." In the hallway. "You're a lawyer. Consider it a deposition with poor acoustics." Another pause. "I know you removed materials from Vale House." "I removed materials my father left for me." The estate may dispute that characterization. The estate can learn new words. Graham lowered his voice. "Your father's condition was complicated." Nora stared through the peephole at the distorted shape of his face. "Say dementia," she said. I said complicated. "Because dementia would require medical proof, and you don't have it." His eyes shifted. Small. Almost nothing. But she saw it. "Nora, he said. You are grieving. People in grief often attach meaning to fragments. Like unsigned drafts, audio recordings, video statements? Graham went still. There it was. Power shifting so quietly it made no sound. You should be careful, he said. So should you. Possession of privileged materials. Whose privilege? He did not answer. Nora leaned closer to the door. Did you know he recorded you? Graham's face changed. Not fear. Calculation. That told her enough. He did not know which recording. So there was more. I'll be in touch, he said. I'm counting on it. He left. Nora waited until his footsteps faded, then pulled the table away from the door. Her hands were steady now. That frightened her a little. By noon, she had called the one person in Millhaven who hated Graham Pell more than she did. Mara Klein had been a court clerk for 31 years before retiring into a life of crossword puzzles, tomato plants, and selective grudges. She had known Nora since Nora was 7, and had once told Celeste Vale at a school fundraiser that lace gloves did not constitute moral superiority. Mara lived in a yellow house near the river, where the porch sagged and the wind chimes sounded like spoons in a drawer. She opened the door before Nora knocked. You look like your father when he was about to ask for something unpleasant, Mara said. I need to know how to challenge a will. Mara stepped aside. Then you need coffee stronger than grief. Her kitchen smelled of onions, old paper, and lemon furniture polish. Nora sat at the table while Mara read the letter, the draft will, the Pell invoice, and the transcripts Nora had typed from the tape. Mara did not interrupt. That was why Nora trusted her. People who interrupted too quickly usually wanted to steer the truth before it grew teeth. When Mara finished, she removed her glasses. How much do you want to burn? Nora looked at her. The law gives you options, Mara said. Family gives you consequences. I'm asking which room you want to enter. I want what he wanted. Mara shook her head. No, honey. That's the answer people give before they understand the bill. Nora looked at the chipped cup sitting on Mara's table. She had brought it without realizing, wrapped in a scarf. I want the record corrected, Nora said. I want the land protected. I want them to stop using my silence as proof they were right. Mara studied her. Then she nodded once. That's clearer. She stood, went to a cabinet, and removed a red folder. I copied something years ago because Graham Pell annoyed me. Despite everything, Nora almost laughed. Is that legal? At my age, morality has become much more interesting than permission. Inside the folder was a list of complaints filed against Pell and Wexler. Most had gone nowhere. Estate disputes, missing codicils, sudden revisions favoring the family member with greater access to liquid funds. One name appeared twice. Lucien Ardent. Nora's skin prickled. Mara tapped the page. He calls himself a legacy strategist. Rich people hire him when they want ugly things done elegantly. He's connected to other estates? Yes. How many? Enough that people whisper. Not enough that anyone proves. Nora looked down at the complaint list. Why didn't anyone stop him? Mara gave her a tired smile. Because he doesn't steal from strangers. He teaches families to steal from each other. The sentence settled between them. Nora thought of Ellis wanting to be admired, Celeste wanting control, Maribel wanting peace. Lucien had not invented their weaknesses. He had arranged them. Like flowers. Like evidence. Mara poured coffee into 2 mugs. You'll need an attorney outside this county, she said. And you'll need something stronger than your father saying his intentions were misrepresented. I have recordings. Good. Video. Better. A ledger. Mara's eyes sharpened. What kind of ledger? Nora told her. Mara leaned back slowly. Leonard always did know where to place a knife. It's missing a page. Then someone knew it mattered. Ardent's first approach. Mara's mouth tightened. Find that page. How? Start with the person who took it. Nora thought of Maribel's hand hovering over the drawer. No, she said softly. Mara watched her. No? I know who was afraid of the memory card, but the ledger page. Her mind moved backward. The storage unit, the boxes, the lavender smell, the recorder, the labels. The unit had been intact, dust unbroken except near the boxes she opened. If someone had taken the page, they had done it before the ledger reached storage. At Vale House, in her father's study, near the end. Nora remembered Celeste at the funeral reception, telling a cousin Leonard had become fixated on old grievances. She remembered Ellis saying Dad's papers were disorganized. She remembered Graham insisting all documents be gathered by his office. But she also remembered something else. The night before her father died, Nora had gone into his study to get his reading glasses. Her mother was there, standing at the desk, holding the green ledger. Celeste had looked up and smiled. Your father keeps the strangest little diaries, she had said. At the time, Nora thought nothing of it, because by then she was exhausted enough to mistake danger for habit. Nora left Mara's house with 3 names: an estate litigator in Ashford City, a forensic document examiner, and a reporter Mara described as annoying in the correct direction. She called the attorney first, then the document examiner, not the reporter. Not yet. Kindness was not weakness, her father had told her once, after she forgave Ellis for losing her savings in one of his ventures. Nora had believed him then because she thought kindness meant enduring. Now she wondered if kindness could mean waiting long enough for the truth to arrive fully dressed. That night, she received a text from an unknown number. You are being offered one chance to walk away with dignity. Nora stared at it. Then another message came. Your father's reputation does not survive this. A third. Neither does yours. No signature. But she did not need one. She took screenshots, printed them, and placed them in threats less polite. Then she made tea in the chipped cup. The smell of black tea filled the apartment. Rain began again, soft against the windows. Nora sat at the table and opened the 5th tape. For 20 minutes, her father spoke of medication, sleep, the pain in his hip, the way Celeste had stopped entering rooms noisily because guilt prefers soft shoes. Then, near the end, another voice appeared. Ellis. Dad, you're making this impossible. I'm making it honest. You think Nora can run this place? She can barely run her own life. Nora closed her eyes. Her father's voice was calm. She has been running yours in pieces for 20 years. Ellis laughed bitterly. That's what she does. She makes herself necessary and then resents everyone for needing her. A chair scraped. Leonard said, Do you believe that? I believe she wants us all indebted. Silence. Then Leonard, softer. No, Ellis. That is you describing what you would do with her virtues, if you had them. The recording ended. Nora sat very still. The pain was strange, not sharp, hollowing. She had known Ellis resented her. She had not known he had built an entire theory around her goodness to make himself feel less indebted to it. At 9 the next morning, the Ashford attorney called back. Her name was Priya Sen. Her voice was brisk, warm, and skeptical in a way Nora found comforting. I reviewed what you sent, Priya said. You have enough to raise serious questions. Not enough yet to guarantee reversal. What do I need? The executed will, medical records, draft history, witness list, proof of undue influence or fraud, and ideally, evidence tying Pell's changes to financial interest. Lucien Ardent. Yes, I did a preliminary search. Nora looked up. You know him? I know of him. He operates in spaces where old property, family conflict, and development pressure overlap. Never officially in control, always adjacent. What does that mean for me? It means you should assume he is planned for ordinary confrontation. Nora looked at her wall timeline. Then I won't give him ordinary confrontation. Priya paused. Good. But listen carefully. Do not threaten. Do not accuse publicly yet. Do not confront anyone alone if you can avoid it. And do not give them original documents. I make copies. Make more. Nora almost smiled. For the first time in weeks, someone had given advice in her language. Over the next 5 days, Nora became quieter than anyone in her family expected. She did not respond to Ellis's messages except with short, mild sentences. I received your email. I understand your position. Please direct legal matters to my attorney. She did not answer Celeste at all. She met Priya in Ashford and handed over duplicate drives, copied tapes, scans of the ledger, photographs, invoices, emails, texts, and the memory card Maribel had stolen, then surrendered too late. Priya's office overlooked a bus station and smelled faintly of printer toner and peppermint gum. She reviewed everything with the focus of someone assembling a machine. This is not only a probate challenge, Priya said finally. This could become a professional misconduct complaint, a civil fraud claim, and possibly criminal referral, depending on what discovery shows. Nora nodded. There's something else, Priya said. Nora looked up. Your father's video. It is powerful, but Arden's voice on it creates a complication. How? If Arden recorded Leonard stating his intentions, then later participated in a plan contradicting those intentions, either he changed sides, or he recorded it for leverage. Nora had already thought that. Hearing it aloud made it worse. Leverage against whom? She asked. Priya's expression was grim. Everyone. On the 6th day, a courier delivered a package to Nora's apartment. Inside was a copy of the executed will. Finally. Nora read it standing at the kitchen counter. The will left Vale House and all conservatory holdings to Vale Preservation Trust, with Ellis as managing trustee, Maribel as cultural director, and Celeste granted lifetime residence rights. Nora received $20,000, her father's personal effects as agreed upon by the trustees, and a sentence thanking her for years of emotional support. Emotional support. Not labor, not sacrifice, not stewardship. Emotional support. Nora took out the draft from the blue envelope and placed both pages side by side. The structure was identical. The language had been surgically altered. Where the draft said ownership, the executed will said advisory acknowledgement. Where the draft said Nora, the executed will said trust. Where the draft said conservatory archives, the executed will said personal effects subject to trustee discretion. The betrayal had not been dramatic. It had been edited. Nora scanned the signatures. Her father's signature looked right at first glance. Then she saw the hesitation in the L. Leonard's L usually rose in a single, confident stroke. This one trembled, stopped, and restarted. A dying man's hand, maybe, or a guided one. The witnesses were Graham Pell and a paralegal named Tessa Rowan. Nora copied the page and sent it to Priya. Then she searched Tessa Rowan. Nothing at first. Then a professional profile. Former paralegal, Pell and Wexler. Current records coordinator, North Point Development Group. Nora stared at the screen. North Point was the company rumored for years to want the marshland behind the conservatory. Lucian Ardent's contract promised him a percentage of any development partnership. Tessa Rowan had witnessed the will, then gone to work for the likely developer. Nora called Priya. Priya answered on the second ring. "I just saw it," she said. "Tessa Rowan." "Yes." "Is that enough?" "It's a thread." "How do we pull it?" "Carefully." But Nora was no longer looking at the screen. She was looking at an old invitation pinned under a magnet on her refrigerator. The Vale Conservatory Autumn Donor Supper. Friday, October 29th, 2 nights away. She had forgotten it was still there because she had planned the menu months ago, before her father died. Roasted squash soup, pear tartlets, black tea service with lavender honey because Leonard loved it. The supper had been intended as a memorial fundraiser. Now Ellis would host it as managing trustee. Maribel would speak about legacy. Celeste would receive sympathy beneath chandeliers. Lucienne Ardent would likely attend. And Graham Pell would stand near the bar, dry as paper. Nora looked at the invitation for a long time. Then she called the reporter. His name was Devon March, and he answered with the distracted irritation of a man who had been hoping for scandal, but expected nonsense. By the end of the call, he was quiet. "You have documents?" he asked. "Yes." "Recordings?" "Yes." "Can you prove development interest?" "Not fully." "Then don't go public yet." Nora blinked. "That's not what I expected a reporter to say." "Bad stories go fast. Good stories arrive alive." She liked him immediately. "What do you need?" "A link between Ardent, North Point, Pell, and the altered estate plan." "I may have one at the donor supper." "Nora, do not play detective in a room full of people with lawyers." "I'm not playing." "That worries me more." She hung up and spent the next day preparing not a confrontation, but a test. She printed copies of 3 documents, the altered will page, the Ardent fee clause, and the still image from her father's video showing Lucian off camera reflected faintly in the study window. Not proof enough, bait enough. She placed each in a cream envelope, one for Ellis, one for Graham, one for Lucian. To Maribel, she sent nothing. At 4 in the afternoon on the day of the supper, Maribel appeared at Nora's door again. This time she looked polished. That meant she was frightened. "Don't go tonight," Maribel said before Nora could speak. Nora leaned against the doorframe. "Hello to you too." "I mean it. Who sent you?" "No one." Nora waited. Maribel looked down. "Ellis knows you contacted a lawyer." "Good." "Mom is furious." "Also good." "Lucienne told Ellis you might try to embarrass the family tonight." Nora tilted her head. "Lucian said that." "Yes." "Before or after he admitted he arranged the theft of Dad's estate?" Maribel flinched. "He says you're unstable." "Of course he does. He says Dad's recordings won't hold up because he was coached." Nora's chest tightened. "Coached by whom?" Maribel's voice broke. "You." There it was. The weapon Priya had predicted. Nora's years of care transformed into manipulation. Her presence at her father's bedside turned into motive. Her knowledge of his medication turned into opportunity. Her love turned into evidence against her. For 1 second, she could not breathe. Maribel stepped forward. "Nora, listen to me. I know that's not true. Do you? Yes. Will you say it under oath? Maribel went silent. The answer filled the hallway. Nora nodded slowly. You should leave. Nora, I have kids. Ellis helps with school fees. Mom helps with the house. If this blows up, you lose comfort. Maribel's eyes flashed. I lose family. Nora looked at her sister for a long moment. No, she said. You lose the story where family and comfort were the same thing. Maribel recoiled as if slapped. Nora softened despite herself. That was the worst part. She still loved her. Love did not evaporate when respect did. It lingered, making every boundary feel like surgery. Maribel, Nora said quietly. Did Mom take a page from Dad's green ledger? Maribel's face changed. Not confusion. Fear. You know about the ledger? Yes. Maribel looked over her shoulder, though the hallway was empty. She didn't take one page. Nora went cold. How many? I don't know. I saw her burning papers in the east fireplace after Dad went to the hospital. Nora gripped the door frame. She said they were old grievances, Maribel whispered. She said Dad had become cruel near the end, that he was writing things to punish us. And you believed her. I wanted to. That was the most honest sentence Maribel had ever given her. Nora closed her eyes. What was on the page? I only saw one before it burned. It mentioned Ardent and your fellowship. Nora opened her eyes. My fellowship? Maribel nodded, crying now. Portland. The one you said you turned down because you weren't ready. Nora remembered the envelope arriving when she was 32. A fellowship in botanical restoration. 1 year in Oregon, housing included. A stipend. A life where her name would be printed under her own work. She had turned it down after Celeste's emergency surgery, Ellis's divorce crisis, Maribel's first pregnancy, and her father's first serious fall. Everyone had needed her. At least, that was what she had believed. What about it? Nora asked. Maribel was trembling. I heard Mom and Dad fighting years ago. He said you had to be allowed to go. Mom said if you left, everything would collapse. Then Lucian came to the house. Lucian? I didn't know who he was then. I just remember his voice. He told Mom some people are easier to keep if they think staying was their idea. The hallway seemed to drop away beneath Nora. Some people are easier to keep if they think staying was their idea. Nora had not sacrificed only because she was needed. She had been managed. Her guilt had been cultivated like a garden. Maribel reached for her. Nora stepped back. No. I'm sorry. Stop saying that. What can I do? Nora looked at her sister. This was the moment, she realized. The moment where old Nora would give Maribel a task small enough to survive, then forgive her for doing half of it. Not this time. Tonight, Nora said, when someone lies, don't make peace. Maribel swallowed. I don't know if I can. Then don't ask me what you can do. Nora closed the door gently, not slammed. Gently was harder. The donor supper began at 7. Vale Conservatory glowed against the dark like something innocent. Warm light shone through restored glass panels. Rainwater clung to the ironwork. Inside, guests moved among citrus trees and ferns, their voices soft beneath the high roof. A string quartet played near the fountain. Nora had repaired that fountain herself after the pump failed in 2016. The plaque beside it read, "Restored through the generosity of Ellis Vale." She touched the edge of the plaque as she passed. Cold brass. Clean lie. Heads turned when she entered, Not dramatically, just enough. Ellis saw her first. His smile held for 1 second before tightening. Celeste stood beside him in dark green silk, one hand resting on his arm. Maribel was near the dessert table, pale beneath perfect makeup. Graham Pell spoke with 2 donors by the orchids. Lucien Ardent stood under the old fig tree, holding a glass of white wine. He looked exactly as Nora remembered from the photograph. Silver hair, rimless glasses, a face trained never to hurry. He saw her and smiled, as if they had been expecting each other. Nora did not approach him first. She moved through the room, greeting people who had known her for years, and somehow did not know what she had done. Mrs. Alder from the garden club thanked her for helping with Leonard. A banker praised Ellis's stewardship. A donor asked whether Nora still dabbled in plant drawings. Nora answered each kindly. Kindness kept people talking. Weakness made them cautious. At 7:30, Ellis took the microphone. He stood beneath the hanging ferns, handsome, mournful, lit from above like a portrait deciding its own caption. My father believed legacy was not what we inherit, he began, but what we protect. Nora stood near the back beside a potted bay tree. Her father's tape recorder was in her coat pocket, not playing, not yet. Ellis spoke of responsibility, continuity, family unity. He thanked Celeste for grace, Maribel for vision, Graham Pell for guidance, Lucien Ardent for strategic wisdom. He did not say Nora's name, not once. People applauded. Nora felt something old rise in her. The familiar heat of being erased in public while being expected to clap. This time, she did clap. Slowly. Ellis's eyes found hers. For just a moment, uncertainty crossed his face. After the speech, Lucien approached her. Nora Vale, he said. I've wanted to meet you properly. His voice was the voice from the video. Yes, she said. You were present when my father recorded his statement. Lucien did not blink. A difficult period. For whom? He smiled faintly. For everyone, I think. She handed him the cream envelope. What's this? A memory. He looked amused. Dangerous things, memories. Only to people who edit them. His smile remained, but the warmth left it. Across the room, Graham had received his envelope from a waiter Nora had tipped $50. Ellis opened his near the bar. 3 men, 3 envelopes, 3 small pauses. Nora watched the pauses. Graham went pale. Ellis went red. Lucien went still. That was the order of guilt. Graham moved first, crossing toward Lucien. Ellis followed. Celeste saw them gathering and excused herself from a donor. Nora slipped behind the fern partition near the service corridor. She knew this building better than any of them. Sound traveled strangely through the old greenhouse. Conversations beneath the fig tree carried through the heating pipes into the potting room if the vent was open. Nora had discovered that at 14 while hiding from a party. At 46, she opened the potting room vent and turned on her phone recorder. Lucien's voice came through first. She's fishing. Graham answered, low and harsh. She has the fee clause. She has part of it. Ellis said, You told me there was no paper trail. Lucien's voice stayed calm. I told you there was no paper trail that mattered, unless you panicked. Celeste spoke next. Do not patronize my son. Then advise him not to behave like prey. Nora closed her eyes. Even now, Lucien was arranging them. Graham said, If she has Leonard's recordings, she has fragments, Lucien said. An emotional daughter with fragments. We focus on undue influence. Nora isolated him, managed his medication, controlled access. Ellis interrupted. She did not isolate him. Silence. Nora opened her eyes. Ellis's voice came again, lower. She was there because we weren't. Celeste hissed. Ellis. No, he said. Let's not pretend. Something inside Nora shifted painfully. Not forgiveness. Recognition of a crack. Lucian said, guilt is understandable. Confession is expensive. Graham muttered, the will stands unless she proves fraud. And she cannot, Lucian said, because Celeste removed the ledger pages. Graham controlled the drafts, and Ellis will testify that Leonard feared Nora's dependence on the property. Nora's hand tightened around the phone. There it was. Enough. Then Celeste said something that made the room inside Nora go silent. What about Maribel? Lucian replied, Maribel wants peace. Give her a version of events that lets her cry and remain comfortable. Nora looked through the crack in the door. Maribel stood in the service hallway behind her. She had heard everything. Her face was white. For once, she did not cry. The sisters looked at each other. The old pattern opened between them like a door. Nora expected Maribel to retreat. Instead, Maribel walked past her into the main room. Nora whispered, Mary. But it was too late. Maribel stepped beneath the fig tree and said clearly, I won't. The conversation stopped. Guests nearby turned. Ellis stared at her. Celeste's face hardened. Graham looked toward the exits. Lucian simply watched. Maribel's hands shook, but her voice did not. I won't cry and stay comfortable. Celeste moved toward her. This is not the time. Maribel looked at their mother. That sentence is why none of us have told the truth in 20 years. The room quieted further. Nora stepped out of the service corridor. Ellis saw her, then the phone in her hand. His expression changed. Lucian noticed, too. For the first time, something like irritation crossed his face. Nora walked to the microphone Ellis had left near the podium. She did not turn it on. She did not need to. Dad kept records, she said. Celeste's voice cut across the room. Nora is unwell. The old sentence. The family sentence. The sentence used whenever Nora became inconveniently articulate. Nora looked at her mother. No, she said. I am finished being useful to lies. Lucian set down his glass. Miss Vale, I would caution you. Of course you would. Graham stepped forward. Anything said here may expose you to liability. Priya Sen's voice came from behind him. Then I'm glad I arrived in time. Nora turned. Priya stood at the entrance in a dark coat, holding a folder. Beside her was Devon March, the reporter, looking delighted in the grim way only reporters can. Ellis whispered, Nora, what have you done? Nora looked at him. What you taught me, she said. I invited witnesses. Lucian adjusted his cuffs. Public scenes rarely produce truth, he said. Mara Klein's voice rose from near the dessert table. No, but they do produce subpoenas. Nora almost laughed. Mara had come, after all. The room had shifted now. Donors whispered. Board members looked at one another. The quartet had stopped playing. Rain tapped against the glass roof in delicate, relentless beats. Priya approached Nora, took the phone, and asked softly, Did you get it? Nora nodded. Good. But Lucian was smiling again. That worried her. He turned to the guests with practiced regret. I am afraid grief has overtaken what was meant to be an evening honoring Leonard Vale. Estate matters are painful. I encourage everyone not to mistake family anguish for evidence." His voice was perfect, measured, compassionate, deadly. Then he turned to Nora. "Your father cared for you deeply, but care is not competence, and love is not title." The words struck exactly where he aimed. For one moment, Nora saw herself as they would paint her, unmarried, childless, living above a shop surrounded by old papers, clinging to a house because she had never built another life. A woman mistaking service for ownership. A daughter confusing gratitude with inheritance. Lucian leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough that only those nearby heard. "You can still leave with dignity." Nora looked at him. Then she understood the final part of his design. He did not need to beat her evidence if he could make her perform instability in public. He wanted anger. He wanted tears. He wanted one desperate accusation donors could later describe with sympathetic discomfort. Poor Nora. She never recovered from her father's death. Nora reached into her coat pocket and touched the chipped teacup she had wrapped in cloth. She had brought it without a plan, or maybe with a plan her hands understood before her mind did. The ceramic was cool. The crack in the handle pressed against her palm. She thought of her father saying, "A thing unwritten becomes a thing someone else can rename." She thought of Maribel standing under the fig tree, finally choosing discomfort. She thought of Ellis saying, "She was there because we weren't." Then Nora turned on the microphone. Her voice, when it filled the conservatory, was quiet. "My father's name was Leonard James Vale. Near the end of his life, people in this room used words like confused, emotional, complicated, and sentimental to describe him. So I'm going to let him describe himself." She pressed play on the tape recorder. Static moved through the speakers. Then Leonard Vale's voice filled the glass house. "My name is Leonard James Vale. I am recording this because I have reason to believe my intentions regarding my estate are being misrepresented." A sound passed through the guests, not shock exactly. Recognition that the room had become evidence. Celeste stood motionless. Graham closed his eyes. Ellis looked at the floor. Lucian watched Nora. Her father's recorded voice continued. "I leave Vale House and the conservatory archives to Nora Elise Vale, not as charity, not as guilt, but because she is the only person who has preserved them without needing applause." Nora looked down. She did not want everyone watching her receive the words. She had wanted them in a kitchen years ago, while he was alive. But justice rarely arrived in the shape of the original wound. The recording continued until the moment Lucian's voice answered from off-camera. "Yes, Leonard." People turned toward Lucian. He smiled sadly. "A recording taken out of context," he said. Priya stepped forward. "Then you'll have the opportunity to provide context in deposition." Graham whispered something under his breath. Celeste moved toward the exit. Mara blocked her with the calm pleasure of an old woman who had waited years for a useful doorway. But the climax did not arrive with shouting. It arrived with Maribel. She walked to Nora's side and took the microphone. Nora looked at her, startled. Maribel's face was wet now, but she did not hide it. "My name is Maribel Vale Harker," she said. 3 weeks before my father died, my mother asked me to destroy a memory card from his desk. I did not destroy it. I hid it. Yesterday, I gave it to Nora. Celeste whispered, "Maribel." Maribel looked at her mother. "No." One word. Small. Devastating. I also witnessed my mother burning pages from my father's green ledger after he was hospitalized. At the time, she told me they were old grievances. Tonight, I heard Mr. Ardent confirmed those pages were removed because they mattered. Ellis looked at Celeste. Mom? Celeste's face twisted. Everything I did to protect this family. Nora almost closed her eyes. There it was again, the sacred excuse. Lucien began moving toward the exit, not fast, just enough. Devon March stepped into his path. Mr. Ardent, Devon said pleasantly. Would you like to comment? Lucien's smile thinned. No. Oh, that may be wise. At that moment, Tessa Rowan entered the conservatory. Nora did not know her at first. A woman in her 30s, rain in her hair, wearing a gray coat, and the terrified expression of someone who had spent too long carrying a document under her ribs. Priya recognized her. Tessa? Graham turned so quickly he nearly stumbled. Tessa looked at him, then at Lucien. I'm sorry, she said. Lucien's face went blank. Not angry. Blank. That was when Nora knew the hidden architecture had cracked. Tessa reached into her coat and removed a folder. I witnessed Leonard Vale's will, she said, voice shaking. But not the version filed with the court. The room seemed to inhale. Graham said, Tessa, stop. She did not. I was told it was a corrected signature packet. Mr. Pell said Mr. Vale had approved the revisions. Later, Mr. Ardent arranged my position at North Point. I told myself it was coincidence. It wasn't. She handed the folder to Priya. Inside was a scan of the signature page attached to a different will. The will Nora's father intended. The draft was not unsigned after all. The signed version had existed. It had been separated from its body and attached to the altered document. Documentation. Not memory, not emotion, not family testimony. Paper. Dates. Files. A paralegal who had kept one copy because guilt had better instincts than fear. Graham sat down. Just sat, as if his knees had resigned before the rest of him. Ellis whispered, You forged it? Graham looked at Lucien. Lucien said nothing. And that silence answered a question Nora had not known to ask. Graham had not been the architect. He had been the instrument. Lucien had chosen every weakness in the family and tuned them until they played the same betrayal. Celeste's pride, Ellis's hunger, Maribel's fear, Graham's ambition, Nora's silence. He had not stolen the estate. He had taught them how to justify stealing it from her. Lucien finally spoke. Documents can be misunderstood. Mara laughed. It was not polite. Priya said, So can conspiracies, until discovery. Devon was already typing. Guests murmured. Board members moved away from Ellis. A donor removed his name card from the pledge table. The old world did what old worlds do when scandal enters with receipts. It rearranged itself away from liability. Celeste turned on Nora. The fury in her face was almost a relief. At least it was honest. You have destroyed us. Nora looked at her mother. No, she said. I documented the room where you did it. Celeste's mouth trembled. For one moment, beneath the beauty and command, Nora saw fear. Not fear of poverty, not even fear of disgrace. Fear of being known accurately. That was the punishment Celeste had spent a lifetime avoiding. Ellis approached Nora slowly. He looked older than he had an hour ago. I didn't know about the signature page, he said. Nora said nothing. I didn't know, he repeated. But you knew enough. He nodded. The nod cost him something. Not enough, but something. I wanted the house, he said. I wanted them to say I saved it." "Well, they did." He swallowed. It didn't help. Nora looked at her brother then, really looked at him. The boy who had hidden report cards, the man who had accepted applause for work he did not do, the son who wanted the Vale name large enough to cover his smallness. Understanding arrived. Forgiveness did not follow. "You'll need to resign from the trust," she said. His eyes filled. "Yes." "And tell the board why." He looked toward the gathered donors, then back at her. "Yes." Maribel stood beside Nora, trembling. Celeste stared at both daughters as if they had become strangers. Perhaps they had. Lucian was escorted out not by police, not yet, but by two board security officers who looked deeply uncomfortable touching a man everyone had been thanking 10 minutes earlier. Graham followed with Priya's formal notice in his hand and ruin in his eyes. Tessa sat near the fountain, crying silently while Mara gave her tea from a paper cup. The supper dissolved, not suddenly, in layers. Guests left in clusters, whispering into phones. The quartet packed their instruments. Rain kept falling on the glass roof, soft and patient. By 10, only the family remained, along with Priya, Mara, Devon, and the staff Nora had hired months ago. Celeste stood beneath the fig tree. "I loved your father," she said. Nora was too tired to argue. "I believe you." Celeste looked startled. Nora continued. "I also believe you punished him for loving me in a way you could not control." Celeste's face collapsed for 1 second, before she rebuilt it. "He made me feel invisible." Nora almost smiled, not with humor. There it was, the wound beneath the wound. Celeste had felt erased by Leonard's late tenderness toward Nora, by the conservatory, by aging, by a life where control had become her last form of beauty. So she erased her daughter first. "That may be true," Nora said, "but you made me pay your debt." Celeste's lips parted. No answer came. For once, her mother had no sentence polished enough. Nora picked up the chipped teacup from the table where she had placed it before playing the tape. The cup had survived the evening. That seemed impossible and ordinary. Maribel touched Nora's sleeve. "What happens now?" Nora looked around the conservatory, at the fountain plaque, at the orchids, at the donors' abandoned pledge cards, at Ellis standing alone near the entrance, staring at his own reflection in the dark glass, at Celeste, rigid with the beginning of consequence, at the place she had saved and been erased from. "I don't know," Nora said. It was the first honest answer that did not frighten her. The legal aftermath did not unfold like a movie. It unfolded like weather, slow, inescapable, uneven. Priya filed the probate challenge, professional complaints, and emergency motions to freeze the trust's authority. Devon's article ran 3 days later under a headline Nora hated because it used the word dynasty. But the facts were clean. Graham Pell resigned from his firm pending investigation. North Point denied wrongdoing until Tessa's documents surfaced, then denied different wrongdoing with more expensive language. Lucian Ardent disappeared from public comment, then reappeared through attorneys who described him as an advisor with no decision-making authority. But documents have a way of disliking elegant lies. Emails emerged, payment schedules, draft markups, calendar entries, a note from Lucien to Graham. The daughter must remain morally central and legally peripheral. Nora read that sentence alone in her apartment. Morally central, legally peripheral. It was the neatest summary of her life anyone had ever written. She printed it and placed it in the file labeled, "Things Men Say When They Think They Are Alone." The court eventually recognized the signed original will. Vale House and the conservatory archives passed to Nora. The trust was suspended. Ellis resigned publicly. Maribel gave a sworn statement. Celeste moved out of Vale House before Nora asked her to, leaving behind 3 closets of clothes, 2 portraits, and no apology. The missing ledger pages were never recovered. That remained. Some truths had burned, but not all of them. 1 month after the donor supper, Nora returned to Vale House alone. The air had turned colder. Frost silvered the grass. The cedar tree beside the drive shed brown needles over the hood of her car. She carried 1 box inside, the chipped teacup, the tape recorder, the green ledger, and a new brass plaque wrapped in paper. The kitchen smelled stale. No tea, no lavender, no rain yet. She opened the windows anyway. Cold air entered the house like an honest guest. For a while, Nora did ordinary things. She wiped the counters. She fixed the cloth near the leaking window. She threw away expired mustard from the refrigerator. She removed the formal demand to vacate premises from the drawer where Celeste had left a copy, perhaps by accident, perhaps as one last small cruelty. Then she made black tea. The kettle clicked off. Nora stood very still. The sound returned her to the night of the blue envelope, to the first moment the house had begun telling the truth. She poured tea into her father's chipped cup. Then she carried it to the study. The room was emptier than she remembered. Celeste had taken the good lamp. Ellis had taken the leather chair. Maribel had returned a box of letters with a note that said only, "I'm trying to learn how not to choose quiet." Nora had not answered yet. She would, eventually. Not because everything was repaired, because some doors could remain closed without being locked forever. On the desk, Nora placed the green ledger. Beside it, she placed a new ledger with a plain black cover. On the first page, she wrote, "What is preserved must also be named." Then she wrote her own name, Nora Elise Vale. Not in the margin, not beneath anyone else's, at the top. Weeks later, the conservatory reopened, not with a donor gala, but with a public archive day. School children came from Millhaven. Retired gardeners brought plant cuttings. Former staff told stories that contradicted the official brochures in useful ways. Mara sat near the entrance, correcting people who mispronounced Latin names, despite claiming she was only there for the cookies. Nora unveiled the new plaque by the fountain. It did not say, "Restored through the generosity of Ellis Vale." It said, "Restored by the labor of many hands, recorded here so none are lost." Below were names, staff, volunteers, county workers, archivists, her father, and Nora. Ellis came near closing. Nora saw him standing by the orchids, holding his coat over one arm. He looked uncertain in a way that made him seem younger and less dangerous. "I won't stay," he said. "All right." He looked at the plaque. "You put my name there. You did some work." "Not as much as people thought." "No." He nodded. "I'm paying back the restoration fund," he said. "In installments." "I know, Priya told me." "I'm also writing letters to the donors, correcting the record." Nora looked at him. "That matters." "Does it fix anything?" "No." He breathed out. "Right." They stood together in the humid warmth of the conservatory. Water moved softly in the fountain. Somewhere outside, children laughed near the gravel path. Ellis touched the leaf of a young fig tree and withdrew his hand as if afraid of damaging it. "Dad was right about me," he said. Nora did not ask which part. Ellis looked at her. "I spent years thinking you made me feel small. But I felt small and called it your fault." That was as close to truth as he had ever come. Nora accepted it silently. He left before she could decide whether she wanted him to. Maribel came often. At first, she talked too much, then too little. Eventually, she learned to bring records instead of apologies. She helped identify staff left out of old photographs. She corrected captions where she had been credited for Nora's work. She sat with discomfort and did not ask Nora to make it easier. That was new. Celeste did not come. She sent one letter on thick cream paper. Nora left it unopened for 11 days. When she finally read it, it contained no apology, only explanations polished to a shine. Leonard had neglected her. Nora had judged her. Ellis had pressured her. Maribel had misunderstood her. Lucienne had manipulated everyone. At the bottom, in a smaller hand, Celeste had written, "You will understand one day what it is to be replaced." Nora folded the letter carefully. Then she placed it in the file labeled, "Mother, Unfinished." She did not burn it. That would have been too much like Celeste. Winter settled over Vale House. Nora moved in slowly, not as someone reclaiming a castle, as someone learning which floorboards still held. She kept her apartment above the bookbinder's shop for 3 months, then 6, then gave it to a young printmaker at half rent, because leaving completely felt different from being forced out. She turned Vale House's west wing into an archive. The conservatory lands were placed under permanent ecological protection. The marsh orchids bloomed in spring, small and pale and stubborn. On the first anniversary of Leonard's death, Nora woke before sunrise to rain. Not heavy, just enough to darken the cedar shingles and loosen the smell of old wood from the walls. She went downstairs barefoot. The kitchen was quiet. The cracked window had finally been repaired, but she still kept a folded cloth nearby out of habit. The chipped cup waited on the shelf. She took it down, ran her thumb over the broken handle, and made tea. As the kettle warmed, she noticed something beneath the bread box, a corner of paper. For one wild second, her body remembered fear. Then she pulled it free. It was not a hidden letter. It was a drawing. A child's drawing, left from archive day. Vale House in green crayon. The conservatory in blue. A woman standing beside a tree. Her name written above her in uneven letters. Nora. She laughed then, not loudly, not because everything had been restored, because some things had finally been named while she was alive to see them. The kettle clicked, steam rose, rain touched the windows. Nora poured tea into the chipped cup and stood in the kitchen her family had once tried to take from her. Kindness had not saved her because it was soft. It had saved her because, over years, it had taught her how to preserve things carefully enough that the truth still had a place to return. Outside, the cedar branches moved in the rain. This has been a work of fiction created for entertainment purposes. Names, characters, businesses, places, and incidents are products of imagination and do not represent any real persons or events.